Hi students, I wanted to talk to you about painting hard edge. It's one of those things that anyone who's in design or painting, anyone who works with paint needs to know. It's a lot about hand-eye coordination, trial and error techniques, balancing, holding your breath, knowing how to use the flat side of a brush in 3 different ways. But I think the most important thing of all, I know the most important thing of all, is getting your pile of paint like a buttery consistency. People tend to be really stingy with acrylic and oil paint. They just hold back, and the piles are so tiny. And just like your palette reflects your picture that you make, it also reflects the consistency. And so when you look at the warm-up videos I did about how to mix paint, how to take care of your brushes, how to organize your palette, how to dip your palette knife in the water just enough. And so consistency is one thing. I'm going to break this up into pieces because I want to do kind of what your setup is, and then later I will fill it in just the way you're going to do it. I'm going to have you submit in the discussions 2 versions of this. One is your video, just like I'm doing now, and the other is your finished product. And then we're going to have a wall of work critique of that as if it were a thumbnail, which it kind of is. It's a sort of a precursor to all projects we do because hard edge is used in basically every single project. So anyway, I'm going to have you take a small board, and I will have included it in the supply list. You can never paint on porous surfaces when you're using paint, so never paint on untreated wood or paper or cardboard or anything like that. You always paint on those treated surfaces like the boards and the canvases, things like that. This is painted board, same deal. So what I'm going to have you do, and ignore this smeary thing here, I'm just using this as a guide, is we're going to take a ruler and we're going to make 2 sides, 2 squares. We're going to have a square on the left and a square on the right. We're also going to have a circle on the left and a circle on the right. On the left, we're going to do hard edge without tape, which is actually the preferred way. It's the area of skill that you want to achieve. If you're struggling, either you have a hand trimmer thing or you just haven't really gotten to a place where you're able to get those clean edges, the tape is an option. Some people online and throughout history will use tape to get hard edges because you can get really clean lines. But you also can get a lot of bleeding, you also can get tearing, you also can get a very tedious mechanical looking shape. However, I want you to explore both. So over here, and I'm going to just line this up so it's even with my measurements. I'll put it right here. It doesn't have to be exact, but I'm going to have you do a 2-inch by 2-inch square here. And to make it even, you would use a T-square, but what we'll do instead here is I'll drag this over and put a dot. It's, etc. You'll see what I'm doing in a minute. Actually, let me raise it up a little. All right, so let's say I'm starting at 8. And I'm going to go to 6. Connect it. And then I'm going to go this way, try to get it even. It's okay if it's not a perfect square, but you are going to be doing perfect squares and circles. So you might as well practice that. The good thing about this exercise is you're going to start to figure out how brushes are used and what sizes to use, etc., depending on the shape that you're using. Before I do the circle, I'm going to do another square over here. Line that up. These don't have to be perfectly on one side or the other. I just want you to end up with 4 shapes. 2 squares and 2 circles, that's it. And we just don't want them too close together because we're going to be using tape. And most tape is 1.5 inches or 2 inches or at least an inch, so we want to make sure that we're not crunching them too close together because we want them to be separated. You can also practice this multiple times. You can also practice it before you make a video of yourself doing it. You can do it many times. By the end, you'll have a nice technique and effect to post. Alright, so you have 2 squares. We want to have a square and a square, and then we're going to make a circle and a circle. Since I can't see over here, I'm going to go ahead and put my circle here. You can use any round thing or a compass to make this circle. It's a lot harder to fill in circles hard edge, and our color wheel is circles, so we want to do this before we start that. And then we'll do another one. I'll do one here just so you can see when I'm done. Okay, so we have 2 circles, 2 squares. On this side, we're going to have, it's going to be called brush only, which is the preferred method, which is usually about 90% of my students do it that way right off the bat. Some students start out here and build up to that. The other thing is you have to know this side anyway for borders. We use tape usually only for borders. But just wanted to share this option. Okay, so this is tape. And before you start with tape, I wanted to show you the difference between tapes. Tapes are all radically different in terms of stickiness, in terms of thickness, in terms of what they're used for. There's also paper tape used in watercolor. There's just so many tapes. But I didn't put it on the list because a good roll of tape that's an art tape can be $7 each. Painter's tape can be anywhere from $3 to $5 depending on the quality. And then masking tape can be like $1 and up. So assuming you have masking tape laying around, that should suffice. Just know that when you're working on a surface that's papery, like illustration board, it'll tear if the tape is too sticky and you leave it on too long. So it's all like a trial and error, and every tape is different even within tapes. So this is pretty sticky. I can tell right now. It's very, very sticky. You can hear how sticky it is. So if I were to use this tape on a board, what I would do is take clothing, any kind of clothing, stick it on, whatever clothing you're wearing, and pull it off. What happens is you get a little bit of the fibers from your clothes on there, and that will enable you to put it down and not have it be torn later. However, it's tricky because you might overdo that and then you end up having a bleed. But okay, so, oh, and if you want to use a different tape, this doesn't stick much. So this is great because you'll never have a tear. Not so great because it can cause bleeding. But there's things you can do to prevent that. This is the best tape of all. It's artist tape, super expensive, sticky but really durable and thick and holds things to the wall, and it's just a great tape. But it's one of those too that if it feels sticky, you would hit it on your clothes a little. But regardless of what tape you would use, when you tape something off, of course it's a lot easier with a square. You hold it in the air and press it right on the edge and place it down. But you don't rub it down. You take your fingernail and only rub the inside. I'm going to use the blue tape just so it's more visible. for this part. So you're going to put the tape, place it down, and then take this side of the top side of your index finger and rub it really hard, but only at the edge. If you rub the whole thing, you'll have trouble taking it off. So you want to keep it like loose here, but just rub it down, get it situated like that. This is what I mean about if you left more area, you wouldn't have to deal with starting something while this is in the way, but it'll be fine. You can do it in stages. Okay, so this is on the inside. I'm really rubbing it down. Doing this prevents bleeding. It's no guarantee. If it bleeds a little, you'll have to paint over it the other way. A lot of times people think, oh, I'll tape it, it's so much easier than all that brushwork, but really it takes a lot longer. And you have to really fight to avoid the obvious look that you taped it. But there's a lot of benefits to it too. So anyway, this is great for borders. I'm going to be doing the squares first anyway, so I'll just do those. I'm going to do it, like I said, I'll do it in stages. So, but this prepares it. And you wouldn't leave that on there forever, you know, for a really long time. But you would leave it on there enough to, you know, be able to do a few layers. Because with paint, you want to do a layer, go away, let dry, come back, do a layer, come back, go, you know. That's what makes good projects, and that's what makes good buttery consistency and clean edges. So if you do something once, it never works. Now, of course, if you're using ultramarine, which is the bottom of the wheel, purple ultramarine, those will look like dark gray and black when you use them. So they're transparent. Blue is the best mixing blue. Ultramarine blue is the best mixing. There's multiple blues out there: cobalt, cerulean, phthalo, primary blue. I mean, all these ones that they're basically just horrible for mixing and for a wheel. People like to use them because ultramarine is so transparent, but what you'll see when you do fill something, if it is blue, you might think, why is it so streaky? Why is it so dark? It's the nature of it. So a lot of times in later projects, we might key up the value a little, but on the wheel, you're still going to be using the blue. So the more layers on top, the better, and that's true of any color. So you're going to tape that off. Before I stop on this part, because this one we're leaving blank, I also want to show you how to tape off a circle. Taping off a circle, there's two options. You can do this method, which is quite tedious. And I'm just taking it off of here just because. You take a bunch of pieces all over, and you go like this, literally, all the way around, carefully all the way around. And that way, in the end, you end up with a circle. Same thing, you rub it down in the middle. But organic shapes, I mean, what are you going to do? You can't use that straight edge. So that's one method. The other method is, if you happen to have an X-Acto knife or a box cutter, but the problem with that is if you press too hard, you have a hole in your board. That happens a lot. You have to kind of get to know the blade, and if you can just press just enough to get through without harming the board, then it's a shortcut. So in this case, like let's say you wanted to do that, and you wanted to avoid the tape around situation. You make this darker, use a lighter tape, you put it straight through, and you can see the circle through. Then you go and get your box cutter. Ideally, it would be an X-Acto knife because it's a little more delicate to hold. But when you're doing this, you have to kind of turn all over, keep moving your body so that you get it right, and press along the line. You really have to move a lot because it's a circle. You wouldn't do this with a square because there's no need, but. And when you're all done, you pick up the tape and peel it off, revealing the circle. So this is one method, this is another. The pros of this is there's no cutting. The cons are it's hard to get it exactly round. The pros of this is it's super clean. The cons are you might cut through the board. But either way, that's the method for masking off the square and the circle. So draw these, mask off the right side, and I'll come back later and do the next step.